Cogad Gáedel is a medieval Irish text that tells of the depredations of the Vikings and Uí Ímair dynasty in Ireland and the Irish king, Brian Boru's great war against them, beginning with the Battle of Sulcoit in 967 and culminating in the Battle of Clontarf in 1014, in which Brian was slain but his forces were victorious. The Chronicle, which compares King Brian to Augustus and Alexander the Great, was written in the early 12th century, at least 100 years after the events it describes. Much of the narrative is drawn from the earlier Annals of Ulster, date, based on internal evidence and on the nature of the text's allusions to Brian's great-grandson Muircatachu Abrian. It has been suggested that the work was composed sometime between 1103 and 1111. Cogad Gáedel has been found in 3 texts. These 3 are the books of Leinster c. 1160 CE, the Dublin manuscript dated to the 14th century, and the Brussels manuscript from 1635. Characterization of Brian and the foreigners. The author makes extensive use of long, elaborate passages that describe and highlight the contrast between the Irish King Brian and the foreign army he wars against. Brian and his followers are described in terms of the virtue and courage, are often emphasizing the Christian background and piety. But on the other side of the battle were brave, valiant champions, soldierly, active, nimble, bold, full of courage, quick, doing great deeds, pompous, beautiful, aggressive, hot, strong, swelling, bright, fresh, never weary, terrible, valiant, victorious heroes and chieftains, and champions, and brave soldiers, the men of high deeds, and honor, and renown of Erin. The text goes on to say that Brian and his Dalgais are comparable to Augustus and Alexander the Great, even going on to suggest that Brian's son Murchard was the metaphorical Hector of all victorious Erin, in religion, and in valor, and in championship, in generosity, and in munificence. The text draws heavily on figures of mythology and the Bible, attributing characteristics of Hercules and Samson to Murchard, in contrast with the lavish praise bestowed on the Dalgais. The text describes the Vikings with vehemence and condemnation, though in terms no less hyperbolic. Now on the one side of the battle were the shouting, hateful, powerful, wrestling, valiant, active, fierce-moving, dangerous, nimble, violent, furious, unscrupulous, untamable, inexorable, unsteady, cruel, barbarous, frightful, sharp, ready, huge, prepared, cunning, warlike, poisonous, murderous, hostile Danners, bold, hard-hearted Dandmarkians, surly, piratical foreigners, blue-green, pagans, without reverence, without veneration, without honor, without mercy for God if a man. The text's censure of the foreigners elevates the Irish and Brian even further, setting up a striking difference in moral and religious character between the two groups. Political purpose. The main purpose of the Chronicle seems to be to eulogize Brian Boru and thereby to show that the record of achievements of Brian's Dalgais dynasty proved that they deserved Ireland's high kingship. This was an issue because the Uabrian sept of the Dalgais was struggling to remain the High Kings of Ireland at the time of the Chronicle's writing. There are similarities to a part of the Icelandic Njal saga, which was composed in about 1280. In 1954, the Scalarein Olafus Svensson postulated the incorporation into Njal saga of a slightly earlier and lost 13th-century Icelandic saga, Brian's saga. The relations between the accounts remains a matter of debate, and all the Icelandic written sources are considerably later than the Chronicle. The chronicler of Cogad Gáedel depicts the Vikings as vicious barbarians begins and suggests that the Dubliners are like their ancestors. In short, it may have been partly an attempt to put the Dubliners in the place. Modern scholars consider Cogad Gáedel re Gallaib to be a piece of brilliant propaganda, written in a bombastic style and full of patriotic hyperbole. Although the chronicle remains a valuable source of information about the Viking Age in Ireland, its accuracy is uncertain. Comparable works include the earlier fragmentary Annals of Ireland and the later Cathraim Chain Shazel. Structure and principal characters. The narrative of the Cogad actually begins with the arrival of the tyrannical Iva of Limerick, this only after a long introduction. The first part of the chronicle, which is composed primarily of valuable annalistic material taken from sources mostly no longer extant today. The Munster section comprises a full quarter of the Cogad in total and a third of the narrative proper. The principal characters are Iva of Limerick, Mathgamain Mac Senetig, Brian Boru, Mael Muad Mac Brain, defeated and slain in the Battle of Beliclecta, Donoban Mac Cathail, defeated in the Battle of Cathacuin. The tale then introduces the Dalciais clan and the sons of Senadai, Mathgame and Brian Boru. The lives and politics of both brothers are outlined, including the numerous interactions with the foreigners. Brian Boru's military aspirations are realized when he defeats the Allied of Eddie O'Neill to gain control over Ulster. Brian Boru and his army defend Dublin against the invaders and drive them back into the sea. Finally, Brian Boru dies at the hands of the Earl Brodar, whom Brian manages to fatally wound. Edition and translation. J. H. ed. Cogad Gáedel re Gallaib, The War of the Gáedel with the Gale Rolls Series. London. Longmans.